What's up, everybody? Hello. Let's take a look at your website today. Why did I do that? I don't know. Who was that? Hello? What's up, everybody? I hope you're doing well. Welcome to the extended cut, minimally edited podcast version of this week's episode, where we are going to take a look at your website. Are you feeling overwhelmed yet? Don't worry, I've designed this episode to make it feel as minimally overwhelming as possible. I'm going to break it down into steps for you to just gently take a look at your website, use a simple rubric to score it on different items, and then you can just take a closer look at some of the items that maybe didn't score as high and change them. But before we dive into the actual content of the episode, a little tangent in the extended cut for today. I haven't been feeling well the last while. Like, I was trying to think, like, how long do I go back? Like, I felt especially awful since like March. So just a few months where I've just felt like I can barely work, honestly. And I felt pretty bad for about a year. But I think now in retrospect, it's been lasting a lot longer than that. It's just been kind of a slow phase into this phase. And if you have been listening to every single episode, you may have heard me complain in the last few months a few times about perimenopause. Yeah, that's a thing, and that's been affecting me a lot. And so I've been working with my doctor trying to figure out what's going on and how to address it. I don't know what I want to say about this because I could do a whole episode about it, and it's not relevant to my channel. But yeah, I feel so much better for me so far. Fingers crossed that it holds. So far, hormonal birth control has taken me back almost a decade. Like, I feel so much better. And I had just been thinking that this is just what aging felt like. And I'm sure there will be that is a component that's at play as well. But it was for me so far, it's been hormones. And so my brain hasn't been working at its fullest capacity or even like half for years. And the last few months, I've just been my energy level has been really awful the last few months. And I haven't been on my A game, and I've just been attributing it to like this phase of life with kids or like aging and the stress of the election. All of those things are still there, but my energy is back. So, if this continues, watch out, private practice skills, second era, Marie enters her 40s and takes on the world. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe in like 2 months, I'll be like, never mind. But today, that was a long-winded intro that you never asked for. But that's all the intro to say that, like, I had this energy level prepping for today's episode that reminded me of the very beginning of private practice skills. It was about 3 months into starting private practice skills that I got pregnant with my first child. And I got a lot of stuff done during those 3 months. And I feel like that era again. So I put together a little bit more involved scripted episode, which I really have not been doing recently. And I'm grateful because I enjoy this so much. So now that you got to hear all that jibber jabbering, we're going to talk about how to improve your website. And the websites are one of those things where it could just, even speaking for myself, it can become so overwhelming. And this is exactly why I teach on it and historically have taught on it so much. I've just been off my A game for a minute, so I haven't spoken about it in a while, but websites, it's like entering a whole planet. Like, if you've never made a website before, it's absolutely overwhelming to try to tackle that. And just all the details that go with it between branding and SEO, user experience. Like, there's so much you can do to optimize your website that it could just kind of cause you to shut down. And I don't want you to feel that way. I don't want to feel that way about my website. And I've been looking at my therapy practices website, so not private practice skills, which I do contract out with the help of a professional for private practice skills, but my private practice, my therapy practices website, I have always DIY'd, and I've been looking at it. It's looking a little stale. I did a total redo of my website in 2021. during maternity leave with my second child. I guess that was a good time to redo it. I started a new one from scratch. It was working great for me, and I think it's time. It's time. I barely touched it since then. I can't believe it's been 4 years. I feel like I just did it, but it's time. So I thought I would bring you on the journey with me of like the steps I walk through to make it simple, easy, not overwhelming to go through your website, no matter how stale it might be, no matter how big or small amount of effort you put into building it or creating it initially, just to help you bring it up to date, refresh it, optimize it, make it a little bit more possible for clients to find you and book with you. Even if you're not an expert and doing a complete overhaul of everything, we're just talking about making some like smaller, more manageable tweaks. So we're going to walk through those steps today. It's been 1,000 years of me talking. I just talked about perimenopause for like 10 minutes. Okay, and if you're helped by this sort of thing, I created a little handout, a little rubric that you can download so that you can just follow along with it as you run through your website. So I've linked to where you can find that in the description box of this episode. Okay, so in this little rubric that I put together for today's purposes, I'm looking at 3 broad categories, and that includes brand clarity, messaging, and user experience. If you don't know what those things mean, don't even worry about it. We're going to get into it. So under each of these categories, I have a few questions to ask yourself about your website and then rank them on a scale from 1 to 5. 5 being like, I'm doing the most amazing one possibly could in this area, and a 1 being like, wow, this is extremely lacking, and everything in between. So the way I intended things with this rubric is that it can be used all by yourself if you wanted to. Like you can evaluate your own website and follow along with this rubric and sort of score yourself on these different areas. But the hope and intent is that you can also invite a friend, invite a colleague, somebody you trust who isn't going to be mean, but who is going to be honest with you, and have them also follow along with the same rubric and score your website. And in a sort of like perfect world, you would do your own scoring. Somebody else would score your website, not while you're like talking about it together. They just do it on their own. And then you can kind of compare notes, and any of the areas where both you and the other person have said that, could use a little bit more work on your website. Those are the areas that you want to target. We don't need to optimize every single little detail of our website because we could spend a lot of time doing that, and we got other things to do. But if we make a few targeted changes in sort of our weakest areas, the areas where we have the most opportunity to grow, those can pack a much bigger punch for much less effort. So that's the idea here. Okay, the first batch of questions are in the broad category of brand clarity. And this is kind of a twofer because you both have to be clear on your own brand and then also clearly communicate your brand. And if you don't know what that means, don't worry, just answer the questions. It's all good. Okay, so if you're following along with this rubric, the first question in this category is, can a visitor immediately tell who the website is for? So in this 1 to 5 scale rating, a 1 would mean that like, I have no idea who this therapist works with. And a 5 would be, hey, my ideal client would instantly feel seen. Like, yes, that's me. That person is helping me immediately. Now, I would say out of all the questions on this rubric, if you only focus on one question, it would be this one. If this one's missing, then it's going to be a lot of work to try to recover from it. If you can make your ideal client feel immediately seen within the first 5 seconds of arriving on your website, like they don't need to scroll, they don't need to click around, they just arrive at your homepage and they're like, that's me. Then you are setting yourself up for so much success, and the rest is just sort of scaffolding around it. And if you're missing this one, it's gonna take a lot of work. You can put a lot of work in other parts of your website, but if it's not clear who you're working with right from the gate, then it's going to be an uphill battle, at least as far as your website goes, if we're looking at your website as a marketing tool. So if you look at your website or you have a friend look at your website and you're getting like a 1 or a 2 or even a 3 for this one, and it's not quite clear who your website is for, this would be a good spot to take a look at, like, do I know who my website is for? If you're not clear on that, definitely jump on that. You could start by identifying your niche, if that's an area that needs a little fine tuning. I have episodes about that. I'll link to those below. And if you're clear on who you help, but that doesn't come across immediately, then you could evaluate to say, like, does that come across somewhere else on my website? How have I communicated that? And how can I, summarize that, convey that very quickly through either text and or images? Ideally, it's a little bit of text and a little bit of imagery that both support. So like, this is who this is for. I don't want to be prescriptive because there's so many different ways you could do this. It's not like a one size fits all, but it is so important that when somebody arrives on your website, if they are your ideal client, that they go, oh, that's totally me. Oh my gosh, I want to keep learning more because they already got me. I see myself right here. This person is trying to help people like me. The second question to ask is, does the site sound like me or like it could be anyone? So the first question is like, can my ideal client see themselves immediately when they hop onto my website? And the second question is more of like, is myself getting conveyed in the website? Can you see myself in the website? Or does it just sort of sound like generic therapist? So for this one, a 1 would be like generic therapist language. Sometimes that can look more like academic language, or sometimes it is kind of like bubbly language, but it's sort of just like, it can sound like it doesn't really say anything beyond like therapy is supportive and I want you to feel better. It doesn't feel specific enough to you. And a 5 would be like, it sounds like me, it sounds natural and real. Like if you're reading the text on your website, does that wording sound like words that actually would come out of your mouth if you were speaking to an ideal client, let's say? And if it doesn't sound like you, then you might want to kind of look a little bit more closely at what aspects about your website make it not sound like you. And then for this question, we're focusing more on like the text of your website. Like, is this how I sound when I speak? Does this language convey who I am, both in how I talk about myself? Is this how I would speak to my clients if they were sitting in front of me? If I read this text out loud that I wrote on my page, does that sound like words that I would actually be saying? And does it do a good job conveying who I am, like the actual content? If you're scoring lower in this one, there's a few ways you could go about addressing it. I mean, if you're just sort of using like academic language that doesn't feel authentic, one strategy is to like record a voice memo and then pop that transcript into your website. There's a lot of ways you can convert audio to text. I feel like I don't even have to explain that anymore because it used to be more complicated, and now like your phone can do it for you. Anyway, just dictate how you would speak to your clients and then just go ahead and tidy it up, right? Because it's going to have little ums and typos and things that you'd want to clean up. But if you are speaking and then you edit it later, sometimes that can be a way to go about it. Or you could imagine, like, let's say it's your favorite client or a client of yours that you've worked with that kind of best captures your ideal client. You can imagine that you're typing to them. Like if it was them when they were first looking for a therapist, like what would you be saying to that client? Then it's going to feel a lot more authentic. Of course, without being like, hey, so-and-so and naming their name, but like, we're trying to pull for your authentic way of speaking. And the next question to ask in this category is, do colors, fonts, and images align with my brand tone? So this is kind of like the previous question, except instead of focusing on the text and the content of what we're writing, we're looking at all the other bits and pieces. Just the imagery, the colors, fonts, right? So we don't want to be too nitpicky about like, you need a very specific font or the colors have to be perfect, but what's the overall vibe? Do the colors, fonts, all of that feel like you, feel like your brand? And if it kind of feels like you're mimicking somebody else, or it just doesn't quite feel like you, then you can mess around with that and see what makes it feel a little bit more authentic. So the next category to look at is your messaging, which we kind of touched on it a little bit, but we need to like dig into this a little bit more directly. And the first question to look at in your messaging is, are the services I offer easy to understand and navigate? So on the 1 to 5 scale, a 1 might be like confusing or overly clinical language around the services that you offer. And a 5 would be like clear, inviting, client-centered. Sometimes you can arrive at a therapist website and it can be unclear what services they offer in particular. Like, it's clear that it's a therapist website, it's clear that they offer therapy services, but even things like, okay, do you work with individuals or groups or couples or something different? Is it clear to find and access information about those services and navigate through them well? So sometimes this is like kind of a little bit touching on user experience of like, is it easy to find a services tab or something like that? But also the messaging of like, it's not just, hey, I'm a therapist and I see therapy clients, but it's, hey, I'm a therapist who works with folks who are marginalized in the church historically, and the kinds of services that I offer are mostly individual counseling for adults who are navigating questions around their faith or their gender or sexuality, whatever. I'm kind of like ad-libbing things about my services, but you want to start to fill in the blanks of like, here's what kind of services I offer. The next question to look at in this rubric is, does the About page share who I am and how I help? Ooh, the About page. If you are watching this episode and you haven't made your website yet, or maybe it's in process, I highly recommend starting with the About page and then seeing that as sort of a foundation that you build the rest of your website around, because like who you are and how you help is kind of the core of your brand, and it's wonderful if you can capture that in your About Me page. So on a scale of 1 to 5, a 1 on this one would be like, it's all credentials and little focus on connection. And a 5 would balance that professionalism with warmth and humanity. I think sometimes what I see people do is they try to lean into the warmth and connection by adding information about themselves, which a sprinkling of that I think is totally appropriate. But if your About Me page is genuinely like, let's say like a journaling exercise where you're just like, here's all about me. I'm really into native plant gardening, and I have a dog and 2 cats and 2 little kids, and I've been married for this long, and I live in San Diego, and I love the sunshine. I like to go to the beaches on a day off. And if it was all, this is all just, that stuff about me that I just said, right? But if it was all that stuff, and not about the like, and here's how I'm connected to this work. Here's some of my values and how those translate over into why being a therapist or working with the folks that I work with is so important to me. This is really exciting or meaningful or joyful, and it comes out in these ways. Here's the aspects of this work that get me so excited. Like, we want to translate this about me into like kind of the we that happens in therapy, that it's not just like, hello, I'm Marie, and here's a bunch of facts about Marie, and more of like, here's a little bit of context about me, but here's what happens with the us. Here's what I am so excited about, what we're doing in therapy with my clients or with you. And that can really help build a sense of connection, a genuine connection, like you're genuinely sharing about yourself and why this work is important to you. That's going to translate through the text on the screen. Okay, and the next question to evaluate on this rubric is, do I speak to my clients' struggles in their language? So that's kind of a twofer. Do I speak to their struggles, and do I do it in their language, not in sort of like therapy jargon, academies? And on the 1 to 5 scale, a 1 would be very jargon heavy or impersonal, and a 5 would be emotionally connecting and affirming. So we're no longer zoomed in on the About Me page. We're just looking at your website as a whole. But is it clear that you see and understand the struggles that your ideal client goes through and kind of connect to those in some way, whether it's extending empathy or acknowledging how challenging it is in very specific ways? Like, for example, let's say one of your specialties is working with moms dealing with postpartum depression. Rather than saying like, I work with moms dealing with postpartum depression and just sort of stopping there, you'd want to name what that struggle feels like. And of course, postpartum depression is going to look super different from person to person, but if you can kind of create some color in between the lines, then that can help your ideal clients feel connected to you. So it might sound more like, I understand what it's like to have to climb out of bed again for the 3rd time that night at 3 a.m. to feed your child when you just want to go to sleep, and the guilt that you feel for not wanting to feed your child because obviously you care about your child, but you also are just so exhausted and you're wondering what the point of it all is, right? I just ad-libbed that, but right, like speaking to the struggle, and I didn't use clinical terms to say that, like, this is just how somebody might describe what it feels like to be going through postpartum depression, or, one little aspect of it. You want to ask if your website conveys that clearly enough for somebody to feel like, Marie gets this thing that I'm going through. She gets my struggles, and that's already going to help them build trust with you and see that, like, yeah, you're here to help them in their specific struggles because you named them explicitly. But before we get into the rest of the rubric, I'd like to thank Powbox for sponsoring today's episode. Based on a poll that I put out last year, only 1/4 of therapists are confident that the email they're using is HIPAA secure. That means that 3 out of 4 therapists listening to this ad right now either aren't using HIPAA secure email or aren't sure if it's HIPAA secure. In 2023, I made the switch to Powbox, and it's been smooth sailing since. Powbox is the simplest, most effective solution for mental health professionals to seamlessly integrate HIPAA security into our email, all while using our favorite email provider. It's just running smoothly and quietly in the background, keeping any potential space invaders from interfering with your emails. If you'd like to check out Powbox for yourself, they're offering Private Practice Skills listeners a special discount. Just use coupon code SKILLS at checkout to get $250 off your first year with Powbox. Thank you again to Powbox for sponsoring this episode, and now back to the next question. Okay, and the last category to evaluate in our little rubric is user experience. User experience is just like, how easy is it to use your website? We're not even talking about like content, warmth. We're just like, do I know how to get to what I need to get to in order to decide if I'm going to book with you or not? That's a good way to sum up user experience for therapists. So the first question in this category is, can someone easily find what they need, like services, contact, etc.? So on the 1 to 5 scale, a 1 for this might be that it just feels overwhelming or disorganized, and a 5 would be that it's simple and clear and intuitive, right? An easy way to address this concern, if you're unsure, is to just make sure the most important things are right in that top navigation bar, a services area, a contact me area, or, learn more area, however you frame it. And then once you click on those pages, that it can be clear what the services are. If they're clicking on the services, if you're clicking on the contact me page, that you lay out, like, here's my process. If you have questions, you can contact me. Here's how we structure that. Or if you're interested in learning more about booking an appointment, I offer a free 15-minute phone call for anyone who's interested before booking to answer any questions you might have and to see if we're a good fit to work together. You can fill out this form and I'll contact you within 2 days, right? Just here's exactly what to expect, what to do next. Is that all laid out very clearly? And the next question that even honestly, I often forget until like last minute is the website easy to use on a phone? I hope I'm not misquoting a stat or using an outdated stat, but the last I heard about this, I think it's like 50% of people are landing on your website from a phone. It might be more than that, honestly. So it's super important, even though you're clearly designing your website on a laptop, a desktop, probably not on your phone. Most website builders have an option for you to toggle on your phone to see what it looks like, or, just hop over to your phone and open your website and see what it looks like. Is it easy to use? Sometimes you can tell when like a website is not designed for somebody's phone. I remember, for example, I went on a friend's website one time and she had one of those pop-ups where it's sort of like sign up for my email list and then blah, blah, blah. But it wasn't responsive to mobile devices. And so the little X where I X out of the pop-up to just go to her website was like cut off from the screen. It was like out of the frame. And so I couldn't click on the X to get out of the like pop-up to just be on her website. That was a few years ago. I was like, hey, I actually can't use your website. Because then even if you sign up for her email list, if you're like, okay, I can't get rid of this pop-up, let me sign up for the email fit list. Now you're taken to a different landing page and I still can't get on her website. So, I mean, that's kind of a very extreme example, but sometimes like, the font, the text gets reformatted in a way that it just, looks funky or overlaps with a picture or other text in a weird way. So you just want to kind of toggle back and forth between desktop and mobile versions in your editor to just make sure that everything is friendly. It all works both ways. And most editors now, you can kind of be specific about, like, I want it to look like this on the mobile and like this on the desktop. Using the 1 to 5 scale, a 1 would be like, it barely works on mobile, which I think these days, unless you like designed your website 15 plus years ago, it probably works decently on mobile, but you never know. And a 5 would be a seamless mobile experience, that you could do the full website experience from start to finish, booking an appointment or reaching out, whatever the next steps are. You can do the whole thing from the phone. And the next question in this category of the rubric is it clear what someone should do next? Like, okay, I've arrived at your website. I'm your ideal client. I think you're awesome. You've answered all my questions, and I think I want to book with you. And most people, let's be honest, when they're booking an appointment with a therapist, especially if it's their very first time ever booking with a therapist, they're like, I don't really know. I don't really know what the process is for booking an appointment, or do you just do you book a consult first? I didn't know what a consult was. Like, people are not necessarily looped in as well as, like, we know as therapists, yeah, most of the time you're going to have some kind of consultation where you figure out if it's a good idea to work together and all of that, answer any questions, but they don't know that. They don't know. So, make sure it's clear one way or the other what to do next. Usually I like to just put that info on a contact me type page, and all the better if the contact me page is like a very apparent button at the top of your website, just always there on the top of every page in the header. And then they can just get all the information they need about what to expect or what to do next. So on a 1 to 5 scale for this one, a 1 would be like no visible call to action, or it's just confusing. Like, maybe in one place on your website, it says to fill out this form, but then in another place on your website, it says to call you. And just like be consistent, like whatever the thing is, you could say, maybe it's fill out the form or call, but like have the same messaging everywhere of like, here's what to do next. And a 5 would be that it's very obvious and it's encouraging next steps too. It's like, hey, if you're not sure, here's what you can do next to find out more, and we'll go from there. And the last question in our 1 to 5 scale, which is a user experience question, but it's also tying into like all of our website's use as a marketing tool, is does the website meet clients where they are and offer hope? So earlier we talked about the messaging of like making sure that clients' struggles are clearly named in their language. And it's also important to, in addition to that, respond to that by offering some hope. Hey, I see your struggles dealing with postpartum depression day in and day out. It looks like this. And there are tools that can help. Here are some things that I do, or things you can expect when you're working with me that we can utilize together to help you feel better and instill some kind of hope. If you can be specific a little bit about what that can look like, obviously you're not creating a 3-step tailored treatment plan on your website for an individual you've never met. But if you can speak to some of the broader tools, broader approaches that you use, maybe some outcomes that you've witnessed in the clients you've worked with before who might be dealing with similar struggles, that sort of thing can be really helpful. So on the scale of 1 to 5 for this one, a 1 would be like, just you only talk about therapy features and you're not focused on hope. Like, it could just be like, I offer CBT. And it's less about like that transformation, or here's what can look different, or here's the results that I've seen. And a 5 would be that clients feel emotionally understood and hopeful before they've ever reached out to you. So I put together this rubric, and then I was thinking about it with my website, and there were a couple of kind of short answer questions that I wanted to ask that I added on, because I think you could sort of like check all the boxes on these 10 questions and then still be like, but there's something that's not quite right about my website. And so some bonus questions to ask yourself are, what parts of the website do I like the most? And, why do I like them? And are there parts of the website that I don't like? And what is it that I don't like about them? Because sometimes like you might kind of seem like you're doing everything well, but like something just it just doesn't sit right. It doesn't quite feel quite right. Maybe you can't even fully explain why, but it's helpful to sort of say like, ooh, there's something about this section of my website. it's just not quite right. Or it could be like, oh my gosh, I'm obsessed with this part of my website. It just nails it. And if you only feel that way about this area, but not the rest of the areas, then that's really helpful to kind of capture like what's happening in that area. Maybe it's just that like there's something about how you're representing the work that you do that feels like it captures things, or maybe it's even like imagery or something else, whatever it is. It's so helpful to identify that so that you can kind of extract and add that into the rest of your website and keep it consistent. I was thinking about this question because as I look on my website, I mean, there's other things in the rubric that I definitely need to work on for real. But there's also just like, there's parts of my website that I don't super like, even though I felt like they made sense at the time that I put them there, that maybe they just feel like, as I look at them, it's like, maybe that's just like a little bit outdated. And also like a little bit behind the scenes, like my own niche, I think, is shifting with me. I've spoken about this over the years because it is about like every 2 to 4 years, I shift my niche a little bit. And I think I am going to shift my niche because as I look at my website, there's certain things that I have like a reaction to. Like I've been using like the name of my business is Affirming Christian Counseling. And I've always had the word Christian in my business name. Some of that is a little bit of an SEO approach. SEO looks totally different these days. I'm not even touching on SEO today, but I don't think I necessarily need that in my name in the same way that I did before. And even what SEO aside, I'm just thinking like, how many of my clients identify as Christian right now? Like, not most of them. Definitely have clients who identify as Christian, but I do have a lot of clients who would identify as like ex-evangelicals who are maybe no longer identify with the faith, or maybe they're not sure. They're just not sure. And like, they're not necessarily drawn to the word Christian. So like even that, I'm already like, ooh, I think it's time. I think it's time to change that. And some of the other pieces that go along with it, like I have a section on my website that is about like pastoral burnout. And that used to be such a passion of mine. I identified as burning out back when I was on staff at my church. This is like 10 years ago. And now I've learned more things about that specific church and then how churches operate in general and about my own faith, where I'm like, actually, that wasn't burnout. That was me reacting to an abusive system. And so, yeah, I burned out, but burnout isn't the label I want to use anymore. I want to talk about, church trauma or spiritual abuse and name kind of more the core behind at least what for me became burnout. And I think so often when we see church clergy burnout, there's often a story of some unhealth in the system that they're in that led them to burnout. So those are some examples of things that when I look at my website, I go, ooh, that doesn't kind of land in this like everything is lined up just right way that I felt when I first put this website together. So I'd like to go back and change some of those things. So it's like a little window into some of my thought processes, and some of these questions I think can help identify where those areas might be in your website. I mean, that's very specific, of course, to my therapy practice, but it's capturing ways that I've changed, I've grown as a person, but then also like my clinical tools that I utilize, how I approach things has just subtly changed over the years as well. And I'd like my website to represent that. So that's what those questions are for at the end. So if you're noticing that your website is looking a little stale, it's been a minute since you kind of really looked under the hood of your website and were like, what's going on here? Is this working for me? We're not even touching on things like SEO, how many visitors you're having on your site, that sort of thing. I'm just trying to give a very simple, accessible rubric for you to start from, and you can always build on top of it. If you do all this stuff and you're ready to dive into your metrics, amen, go for it. But if you have been putting it off because it's overwhelming, what I would do is I would hop into the description box of this episode, grab the PDF for the rubric that I just shared with you, run through it yourself. You could probably do it in like half an hour. If you really wanted to, you could do it faster than that. And bonus, have a friend, a loved one, a therapist colleague do the same thing for you. Or you could even kind of like take turns in like a consult group type setting and do that for each other's websites. And then kind of compare notes, like where are the places that are below a 3 on the rubric. Where are the places that I'm not really loving or just doesn't quite sit right for me? And just focus on like the 1 or 2 areas first that feel like they're needing attention the most. And if that's all you get to and you spend like half an hour on this thing, it's still a win. You might be surprised how big of a difference sometimes like the lowest hanging fruit or like the places that need change the most, it can make a really big difference. So I think it's worthwhile. Well, thank you so much for joining me in this episode. I hope you found it helpful. I'm looking for more ways to kind of like create like simplified ways to on-ramp into stuff that can be more complicated, like evaluating your website. Like, let's just start with something bite-sized, something manageable. So I hope this helped you, even if you don't use the rubric, to just kind of how to conceptualize how you look at your website when you're evaluating things. And until next time, from one therapist to another, I wish you well.